I'm Barry Malphurs. I'm the chairman of the policy committee. This is the policy committee meeting for May 11th. I would ask that I will officially call the meeting to order and ask that Ms. Manus would read our statement of announcement, please.
A meeting notice announcing the date, time, and place of the May 11th, 2022 Policy Committee meeting was distributed May 6, 2022 to appropriate media and other groups or individuals who have requested notification. The announcement and agenda were posted at the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs Central Administrative Office and on the website. The public has been notified that accommodations such as interpreters, mobility assistants, or other assistance will be provided to individuals with disabilities and special needs if requested in advance.
Thank you, ma'am. The next item on the agenda is the invocation, which I'll do very quickly. If you would bow your heads. Dear Lord, thank you for allowing us to be here and to be a part of furthering to help lives with people with disabilities. We pray that you would be with us throughout this meeting and guide and direct us in the way that you would see fit. I would ask that you would forgive the one who prays of his sins, as they are many. I would ask that you would be with all those that have disabilities and comfort them and help them to understand that you never make a mistake and that none of them are a mistake, that they're actually meant to be the way they are for reasons that you have seen fit. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. The next item on the agenda is simply to say that, as everybody that listens to these meetings often understands, we on this committee operate under unanimous consent of the Robert's Rules of Order. The next item on the agenda is approval of the summary notes, which is a little bit different than minutes. If anybody doesn't know, a summary is a little bit different than minutes. So it's similar, but it's not exactly the same. But I see no problem with the summary that we have generated. So if there's no objection, I'll give about 10 seconds. And if there's no objection, we will accept the summary minutes as written. Okay, with no objection, we'll go to tab 2. That was on tab 1. We'll go to tab 2 next, which is
Commissioner Malphurs, we need to adopt the agenda as well. So.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry, I forgot.
That's okay.
I also will adopt the agenda if I don't hear anything in the next 5 seconds, as written. Sorry about that. The agenda is adopted. The next item on the agenda is under tab 2 is old business, which is the code of conduct policy. And I think we were in May, we had asked that there was a little bit more research done on this matter, and wanted to know what we came up with in that regard. Sure.
Erin is here, and she is going to present you with her research.
Should I stand?
Sure. You can do whichever you want to do.
I just don't want to be rude.
You're good.
Hello, Commissioner Malphurs. My name is Erin Olver. We were introduced at the last committee meeting. I'm one of the new attorneys with the legal department. Yes, sir. We did do further research. We reached out to 4 different state agencies: the South Carolina Department of Commerce, the Labor Licensing and Regulation, Department of Employment, Workforce, and Health and Human Services. All of those state agencies stated that they do not have any sort of limit for employee gifts, which I think was your concern. They more or less follow the state's guidelines, and the state as well does not prohibit or place any limitation on employee gifting.
Okay, well, there is, something called the Ethics Act, right? That also covers this matter.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch the full.
I said, there is also something, according to page 4 of this document, there's also something called the Ethics Act that covers this situation. Is that right?
Page 4. These are which document are you referencing? The ethics?
He's just saying from the current directive says that much of the state, like all state officials and employees are bound by the State Ethics Act.
Oh, yes,
In
ma'am.
addition to this code of conduct, and that Ethics Act has like clear guidance in it.
Yes, sir, and I do have the State Ethics Act and Rules of Conduct. I apologize, I wasn't quite sure what you were referencing. But yes, and that is number 3 to the South Carolina policy. And it does mention within it that employee gifts, there is no limitation to it. There is also a part of it which may be helpful to you. It says receiving or accepting any gift of value from anyone under circumstances for which it could be reasonably inferred that the gift was intended as a reward or for the purpose of influencing any official action on the employee's part. So when we spoke to State HR, they said, although there's not a limitation or restriction for employee-to-employee gifting, that they do look to that rule and consider it as a bribe or see if there's any reason to believe there was a bribe. So there is language referencing if there is an exchange of a gift or value, if it's such that it appears or there's a reasonable inference that it could be made to influence an official act, then that would be in violation of the State Ethics Act. And so
Okay.
you go to the act, that's number 3.
Right, well then, would it be prudent then, as sort of a compromise, that we would insert that into this directive underneath, where it talks about gifts given, and then that way we could reference that act at that time?
Yes, sir, and I did highlight that to bring that to your attention. So other state agencies do include that as well as their state-specific ethics policy. And since we're bound by state ethics policy, I wouldn't see a reason why we couldn't include it in our directive as well.
Okay, well, let's just include that paragraph and just say where it comes from and add that in this area on page 5 if we can. I guess it'd be page 5 right here where it says gifts given by employers or coworkers are not prohibited. I guess it'd be right under that. I would think.
Yes, sir. And
or wherever you would think, wherever y'all would think it would be, just tell us where you thought it was at the next meeting and we can approve it at that time.
Yes, sir. I'm happy to work with our human resources on updating that directive to include the language.
Okay, and we can approve it with that change at the next meeting. The only other thing I was going to ask about this directive was because what I was really concerned about, for the record, is what you just said, which is that somebody would do it as to try to get a raise or try to get preferential treatment or things of that nature. So that would solve our problem, I think. It's probably already solved, but I just like to have things clear. And if you put it in this act, then they couldn't say, well, I didn't know where it was at and all that kind of stuff. It just makes sense to me. The only other thing I would add is about this act is, which something I didn't see last time we looked at this, but it should say, I think, and David, correct me if I'm wrong, or somebody else in the room, correct me if I'm wrong, but it says under conflicts of interest on number 2, and on the same page 5, it says employees should avoid situations by limiting certain dealings outside of the employment. Shouldn't it say they must avoid situations by limiting certain dealings instead of saying should?
So I don't want to give a definitive answer on that since I haven't reviewed that particular part of the directive, but I can question that and see if that's also a change that we could easily update for you.
I don't see why it should say should. I think it should say must avoid these situations. Because must is much different than should. Should, you could argue either way, but must means you can't do it.
For instance, I haven't looked at that particular section. If there's an exception or something else later in the directive and that would make it a conflict, I don't want to give you a 100% certainty that we could change it, but as long as there's nothing else conflicting with that, which would prevent that from being a must, I don't see where that would be an issue to update that as well.
But just send me an email if you don't mind, and if that's a problem, just send me an email if you don't mind, or either get my number and give me a call. It's fine.
Sir.
Unless anybody else on the committee obviously has an objection to any one of those two things I just said.
Must is a strong word. This is Commissioner Miller. It's just, but you just check into it and see. That's a very strong word.
It's saying they must avoid situations. I mean, should avoid situations means I can do it if I want or I don't have to, but must avoid means you have to. I just think it should be, but I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not 100% sure, but I would appreciate it if she'd look into it. That's the only thing I have on this one. Only thing else I have. But I think that really helps this situation. Well, the important thing was what we talked about at the beginning, and I think that really helps. It helps me anyway to make it clear that what that Ethics Act says about that. So if there's not further objection, I'm going to move on. We're going to cause this to be corrected as I just said, and then if there's a problem, we will discuss it at the well, I'll discuss it before we'll discuss it before the commission meeting and go from there. So if there's not an objection to that, in about 3 seconds, I'm going to move on. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the is new business under tab 3, and it is it relates to missing property. Missing property reportings 27501DD, which is page 12, which is on page 11. It starts. The only thing about, there's only two things about this one I was going to ask about, and discuss anyway, which is on page 12. Both of these things are on page 12 that I'm concerned about, which is, and I'm assuming that, I mean, obviously, if there's another member of the committee that has any problem with any other part of it, I'm just starting with page 12. Let's just say that. I don't mean to think anything. I don't mean to imply anything else. But this thing, the way this is written right now to me, it says that if somebody decides they want to purchase something for with this missing property thing, if let's just say they wanted to hypothetically purchase something for $90 and they wanted to call it their own property, then they wouldn't have to report that they had actually stolen that $90 worth of items because they didn't have to report it and they could call it their own. So I'm not sure why it says $100 in there right now is the minimum. I think it should be $10 because that's what the Ethics Act says, $10 or less. So, so why would we put $100 there instead of 10?
$10 or less or $10 or more?
I mean, what I'm trying to say is valued at $10 or more, the after report. I'm sorry. I mean, $10
The
or
ethics
more.
act, the Ethics Act says $10 or more. Isn't that correct? Do I have
Yes.
it right?
Yeah,
Okay.
our Ethics Act says you don't have to report anything $10 or well, you have to report anything $10 or more. But this says $100 or more that you do not have to report. And so you could technically call something your own item and say, well, I'm not gonna report that because I don't have to. So I bought $90 worth of school supplies, let's say, and I don't have to report it. So I just don't know why we would have $100 down there instead of 10 on page 12 and on page 11 for that matter of my booklet.
But it could,
Well, let's,
So I can start a little bit with staff thoughts, and then I'll let some of the fiscal folks, maybe Courtney, you might want to speak to how we got to $100. But I think this is not about purchasing. This is about lost or stolen property. Like something is yours for work and it comes up missing. So it's about an item that's missing that was in your possession for work. And I think we were trying to avoid doing a missing property report for items that, you know, are of lesser value because there's, you know, a process for those things that are more value. Is there something else you guys want to add, Courtney or Janet?
I mean, I can give an example.
Okay.
If you had 2 legal pads and a couple of pens and they got left at HHS after a meeting,
Right.
that would constitute $10, and then we would have to do
A missing
a
property
missing
report.
property report.
I'm gonna agree.
Well, I mean, how do you prevent somebody from doing what I just said? If I have it doesn't have to be lost or stolen. What I'm saying is I can still, if I have a P card, I can still buy $90 worth of stuff and claim it was lost or stolen and don't even have to claim it at all. So how do you prevent me from stealing $90 if this thing says 100?
How many P cards do
I don't have I don't think any, I think,
I'm looking to Tracy. I mean, what's our P card count? I mean, what's the real risk of that? Because aren't those pretty tightly?
They are, everything on the procurement card has to be pre-approved before even purchasing internally in that department. And then everything has to be signed off and taken an inventory of what was bought, received, and then a supervisor in that department signs off on that log as well.
and like I said, this directive is more about something that's lost or stolen.
Yeah, this is.
Not about buying something.
Not using a
Right.
P card.
Right.
What if hypothetically speaking, somebody had something with somebody's personal information on it or something that was and they lost it and didn't have to report it then.
That would be
Because-
covered under a different process related to information security and falls under our CISO.
And does have to be reported.
And that has
Anything-
to be-
Right, anything that has personal information.
Correct.
Okay, well,
Nothing wrong with the $100.
so y'all don't think it should be 50? You think it should be 100?
Nothing is wrong with the 100. It's like, if you look at, and I'm just gonna deal with ethics, right? If I'm running for office and someone give me $99, I don't have to report it. That's in the ethics law. But if they give me $100, I have to report it.
Yeah, but I still say somebody could steal.
I don't see anything wrong
easily.
with $100.
But you know, because I mean, it's just, anyway, I think it should be anything of value myself, but I guess I'm not gonna push the issue anymore, except to say that on page 12, it says it says reports of missing property must be made by, wait a minute, sorry. It says failure to report missing property could result in disciplinary action. I mean, it should say could result in disciplinary action up to and including termination, because it could be stealing. And so, and furthermore, it doesn't even define what disciplinary action means.
I think it's drafted that way purposefully to give flexibility.
I don't want to give flexibility to somebody who's stealing.
Well, if I have full faith that if we had someone stealing from the agency, that HR and legal and that person's direct supervisor would take disciplinary action that would include termination. It just,
Well, then I think it should
this
say
isn't-
that in here then.
I just
Then it
wouldn't
should
want,
say up to and including termination.
okay. We can certainly
Any
ask.
disciplinary action up to and including termination. Because anybody could be terminated for breaking this policy, for not reporting something that should have been reported. They should be. Because if you'll steal $50, if you'll steal 500, you'll steal whatever amount. So, and stealing is stealing, and people shouldn't be encouraged in any way to do that. So, David, what do you think about that?
Well, I think you got a point. I believe the idea earlier was, you leave something on the table and that turns out to be $10, and suddenly you're accused of theft. I mean, I could go either way with it, Barry, and it sure sends a message if you say, hey, $10 or more and you're in a heap of trouble.
Well, I mean, if I think we decided we were going to leave the $100 there, but I'm saying where it says that they must, it says disciplinary action instead of saying up to and including termination. Shouldn't it say up to and including termination?
Excuse me, I thought we were still talking about the monetary amount.
Oh, no. I mean, I understand what you're saying. You could go either way on you could kind of go either way on the monetary amount. I just am big on
Well,
making things.
yeah, because it depends on the circumstances. So I agree with you on if somebody's engaged in theft, then they need to be called on the carpet for it pretty severely. So I mean, yeah, it's you're not giving them any quarter here if it's that much, and that is a pretty good amount of money. I mean, that's if we're talking the 100. That they could lose their job. I like that. I mean, I can support that.
I can
Okay.
support that as well.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, well then it should say in there that under that, in that paragraph, that it should say up to and including termination, and not just, it should say disciplinary action up to and including termination, I would think, right?
Okay, we can add that.
Okay,
We're happy to make that change.
all right. That's the only one I have on this one, unless somebody else has something else. I mean, obviously, I'm interested in talking about any part of it anybody wants to talk about, but if not, I'll give it 5 seconds and we'll change that to say to say that about up to including termination. And that's
I
the change.
think staff got it. They know what to do.
Okay, moving on. The next item is under the Human Rights Committee. It's the next item on our agenda. It's 53502DD. And the only thing I wanted to bring to everybody's attention about that one is is that it says on page 22, see if there's anything else. On page 22, it says that members shall be appointed for 3-year terms of service and staggered, and that they should have one additional consecutive term. I just don't like term limits, and so I would think that should at least say 2 additional terms and not 1 if they want to serve. But obviously the term is so that if the executive director or the administrator does not want them to serve any longer after their term is up, they can. But I think that they should be able to, I personally think they should be able to go for at least 2 additional terms. I don't know where we came up with these 3-year terms as opposed to 2 or 4 or 5 or 1 or 2 or 3 consecutive terms or what. But I just don't like
usually
term
hard
limits.
to find, Barry, it's usually hard to find somebody that's going to take the job seriously. I mean, if you found a good worker that would serve on the committee, it just seems a little short-sighted to cut them loose too early. Let them keep working.
I think so too. Do you have any thoughts on that, Michelle? Ms. Fry, I mean?
I do not have concerns with additional consecutive terms. I would say limiting to any particular number if they come up for recommendation is unnecessary.
Okay. Well, then why don't we change that to 3 consecutive terms instead of 1? Or at least 2 consecutive terms. 2 consecutive terms would be 9, after their first 3 would be 9 years. I mean, I would go with 3. It wouldn't matter to me as long as you, or whoever the executive director was and the facility administrator wanted them to stay. I wouldn't have any problem with 3 additional terms, but that's what I would say. And that way they could basically serve as long as they wanted to, as long as everybody was in agreement. I mean, as long as the important parties were in agreement. I
fully agree. I don't see any concern because they have to be recommended for reappointment.
Okay, so let's make that 3 then instead of 1 additional term. Let's just change that to 3. It's 3 years and 3 additional terms.
So it would be a total. How long could they stay on the committee then? A total
9
of what?
years. 9. That would make it a total of 9 years.
12 years.
Well, you added the other,
3
you went from
plus
2 to
9.
3.
Well, that's right. It'd be 12. So you want to make it. So I mean, I don't think that's too long.
Well,
do y'all? I mean, it's what
I
just think it's
I
as
like
long
your
as it
idea.
is, but I'm not arguing.
I think your first term and then an extra 2, that gives them 9. That's probably long enough from my perspective.
Okay, let's say 2 then. That's fine. That's fine with me. I don't have any problem. I just wanted to make it more than 1, but that's 2 is fine. So we'll say 2. We'll say 2 additional terms. I meant to say 9 anyway a minute ago, so it's fine. I made a little mistake, but it's okay. But 9 is fine with me. So let's say 2 additional consecutive terms. And I think, well, the only other thing I had down here was, the only other thing I wanted to ask about was, it's not really down here or not down here. I just wanted to ask about if somebody is on in one of these situations and one of the Human Rights Committee decides that somebody's rights have been violated and somebody else thinks they haven't been, do they have a chance to come before the committee and talk about it, or how does that work?
Yes, they do.
Does it say anywhere in here that that we will allow them to come before us or anything like that? Does it not need to say that?
The people whose issues.
So on page 23, going into 24, actually on 23, it says The Human Rights Committee shall assure that all individuals coming before the Human Rights Committee are offered a personal representative to accompany them to the meeting to support him or her to speak or to speak on his or her behalf. So, I mean, they make sure that they're offered the ability to come and bring somebody, and then it speaks more to, in the next paragraph, case presentations coming before the committee shall include a summary. The presentation shall include all the information needed for the committee's deliberations. However, all information that might identify the person, should be coded to protect. If the person and or their representative attend the meeting, the attendance overrules the coding requirement. So basically, the person has the right to have their case heard without identifying information, or the person can come and present their own case.
But the person being accused does not have an opportunity to do anything, right?
I'm not sure there's any accusatory. It's really about programming that would violate somebody's rights. Services that are being provided, or programming that's being provided, or any restriction that that a provider might want to put onto a person receiving services. The rights is the person receiving services and their ability to present their case. It's not abuse and neglect, or it's really just making sure that people are afforded their basic rights.
Okay, we'll move on. All right. I don't have any other thing to ask about this one unless somebody else does. Then we'll just change that.
How do we handle the rights, the human rights issues right now? If somebody's got a problem at one of the facilities, it might be covered by federal law, in terms of bars and restraints and stuff like that. I noticed door alarms, restraints, visual, auditory monitoring devices, lock cabinets, blah, blah, blah. And then under C on page 20, under item 3C, use behavior control medications for behavior management. Are they setting the standards for that?
No, so Janet, you want to provide an example to try better?
So generally speaking, if an agency is working with a physician and the team decides that medication is necessary to control someone's behavior, that can be construed as restrictive. And so that is taken before the Human Rights Committee so that the person for whom the medication has been prescribed has an opportunity to say whether he wants to take it or not. And for the committee to just review it to make sure that they don't feel like it is inappropriate or harmful.
So the way I was reading this, they're supposed to be setting the standards, and then you're giving the responsibility. We're giving them the responsibility of use behavior control medication. I might just not be reading sufficiently.
The role of the Human Rights Committee generally is to review the policies of the agency, to make sure there aren't things in policies that are unnecessarily restrictive. For example, a facility may have restrictions on visiting hours or something that could be construed as restrictive. And the Human Rights Committee can review those to make sure that they are in the best interest of the people and that they are kind of the external look at what the policies the agency has. The next level of review is when the agency is indicating that in order to support someone, we need to do some things that the person may not agree with. So for example, we may have to lock a kitchen because someone cannot control their access to it independently.
Well,
And then they're
that-
working to make sure that in addition to that, there is training and education so that the person can regain the right that's been restricted.
so it could be that, how many different committees are we talking about here? How many different entities would have such a committee?
Every agency has one, plus every regional center.
And we have how many regional centers? Is it 4? 5? 5? So is it possible, that each of the, that each of these human rights groups could end up coming up with conflicting standards that would be awfully confusing? I don't see the board getting, and the commission getting, having the responsibility for reviewing the reviewers. But you could have one group at one place that's awfully restrictive, and they say, well, you do it differently over here, here, and here. Why are they getting away with creating such difficulties? Don't you want consistency, and again, I may be misconstrued because this is not an idea I'm familiar with. I'm not opposed to it. I'm just trying to figure out how it's going to work.
So any policies or procedures that are created for regional centers specifically would be created by DDSN and the staff of the centers. So there is that second line of each facility may create it, but it's going to roll up to DDSN central office. The other thing is the Human Rights Committee is more or less a sounding board. They are looking at what's been created to see if it's reasonable and to see if it's correct. They don't create policies.
The other thing I think I want to make sure you understand, Commissioner Thomas, is that human rights committees have been in existence in all of these places since 1996. This is really just work of the policy. So we're not really doing anything new here. This is just kind of a re-up of the policy to see if there's anything that we need to do to make the human rights committees work a little easier.
And they're considered advisory. Is that what it is?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for helping me out.
Thank you, sir. Okay, then I'm just gonna, if we don't have any other discussion about this policy, other than changing the 1 to a 2 for the consecutive terms, we're gonna move on to the next policy. We're gonna approve that like it is with that change and move on to the next policy. Okay, we're moving on to the next one. The next one is the clarification certification and licensure of DDSN residential and day facilities. And first thing I want to say, and I'm sincere whenever I say this is a lot better policy than what we've ever had in the past. This is substantially better, and I'm thankful it is, because we're obviously moving into a different direction with DDSN being a fee for service. We're obviously moving into the direction of quality assurance much more and things of that nature. But the only thing that I wonder about is on this document is on page 33 of our booklet, which is not sure what page.
Page 8 of the policy.
Page 8 of the policy, if anybody wants to know. is under where it says sanctions. I'm not exactly sure why there's not fines for these people who break the, who do not do these things properly, because we have fines whenever somebody has a financial, if somebody has financial reports they have to turn in, we have fines if they don't do that. To me, there should be fines if you do anything that's not a certification under, I mean, that's in any way not done properly for these, because this directly relates to our consumers. I mean, sorry, to the people we serve. And so it should be, if anything, it should be more restrictive than the financial fines that we have, so that you would, so, I mean, it does give a lot of things. I mean, they can do, I see in here where it says they can have a score, and we can go back and talk to them again in and do another evaluation in 3 months or 6 months or whatever it is. But I don't see where we have enough. I don't think we have enough, for lack of a better term, they don't have enough difficulty for not going down this road to begin with. And they also have in here a opportunity for appealing, which the only problem with putting fines in there is it would make people appeal more often. But the problem is, but what you could also do about that is you could say that if you appeal and you lose your appeal, you get another fine, because we don't want everybody appealing for nothing. But I don't see why you wouldn't have fines in there.
What's your suggestion?
Well, my suggestion is we have, for each level, you have a fine of like $500 per level. Like, for example, if somebody has a section 1 failure under class 1 deficiency, that should be a $500 fine. If they have a section 2 deficiency, that should be at least another $500 fine. And if they or more, and if they and then whatever deficiency, whatever those deficiencies we have, they get fined. And like I say, if they appeal, because they got fined and they lose their appeal, that's an additional $1,000 fine, because we don't want people appealing for nothing. But they need to be saying, I mean, they need to be I mean, and I think it should be more than the fines for not turning in a financial report, because this is much more important than, well, it's not more important, I'm sorry. This is much different than that, because we're dealing, like I say, with people that we serve, that we serve. And I realize this is not, may not be popular with our providers, but the point is to be popular with the people we serve and to prevent them from doing these kind of things.
Commissioner Malchus, if I may, I believe that the policy rationale for this proposed change is, if you look, this is regarding situations where the severity or prevalence of deficiency may adversely impact someone's health and safety. And thus the idea of fining means that, yes, that is a punitive measure that might generate action. However, if they are not able to provide a safe environment, then we really don't have any choice but to revoke, suspend, or take action on the license, because the license is intended to speak to the safety. So we believed that the fine was really unnecessary. We were trying to get them to take action to provide a safe environment. And if they can't do that, we're going to have to act on the license anyway, because we have an obligation to ensure that individuals are in a safe environment. I'm going to ask Ann to come up and provide, be able to respond to additional questions or provide additional information.
I wholeheartedly agree. Wait a second before Ann starts talking. I wholeheartedly agree that we should be able to revoke the license. This is something that's never I don't, as far as I know, it was never in our policy before, and I applaud it. Dramatic. I mean, I applaud it with all my clapping I can do. But I was just thinking there should be something short of revoking a license that should be a punitive, and the right word is punitive, a punitive situation for it, because other than revoking a license, we really don't have anything punitive to do to somebody for doing this. And so, or for being, not concerned about these things. And so go ahead.
So Commissioner Malphris, if I may, direct you under the sanctions. If you take a look at item number 3 and 4, we talk about the issuance of a provisional license or a certificate with a shortened expiration date. This is something that DDSN has started doing more frequently than in the past, where if there are problems cited during the licensing review, rather than extending that license for the usual period, we will extend the license for a shortened period. It may be 30 to 60 days to allow the provider to implement their corrections. We have evidence of those corrections, and then we issue the full license. The other thing under number 4 is that we can reduce the capacity of the program. And that has a financial implication, because if we prevent the provider from admitting new residents to a home, as an example, that definitely has a financial implication. The bullets, the former number 5 and 6 were removed because DDSN, under the fee-for-service model, we do not have the ability to withhold the payments. So that's why we took out number 5 and 6 under the sanctions. But we do have the ability to affect the licensed occupancy of the setting and to issue provisional licenses.
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree with you. And you say that we haven't in the past, we haven't had any provisional licenses, and that's always been something that's been ridiculous to me that we didn't have before now, that provisional licenses to where they only had 30 more days. I just don't understand why you don't want to do an additional sanction of a fine in addition to all that, so that we don't ever so that we have less likely to have this problem to begin with. Because if they're going to get fined in addition, then they may not want to start down this road. I just don't want anybody starting down this road for any reason. And I agree with all of the stuff we have in here, except I just wanted to add some fines. I didn't want to take anything from it. I think it's much better.
Barry, did she just say just a few minutes ago that we might not have the authority to impose, that they may not give us the latitude? Could you repeat the idea, ma'am, of what you were saying?
The point I was making is that under the fee-for-service model, the providers are being paid directly through the Department of Health and Human Services. Under our prior model, we had the ability to withhold payments if it came to that point. We are no longer in the payment structure, so we cannot withhold those payments. We would, I suppose, make a recommendation to DHHS, but that would be a separate matter.
All right, so we may, Barry, we may not have, based on what she said. I mean, I think the idea is good, but we may not have the authority to do anything with the money aspect.
I agree.
Well, I mean, we can fine them for not turning in their financial reports on time.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Now the money all flows through a different agency, so we may not have the authority to do a money sanction.
Correct, because our position now is management. Am I correct?
It's nothing to do with management.
I'm in
oversight. We're oversight.
Oversight, but I mean, so do you think, Michelle, do you think that's true? We don't have the authority. We wouldn't have the authority to fine people if we wanted to.
Is that to me?
Yes.
Oh, so what we were saying is, before administratively, it was relatively easy to withhold funds. At this time, if we were to enforce a penalty, we would either have to ask them to write us a check, or we would have to work with another agency, HHS, and ask them if they would be willing to withhold payment. But I do want to emphasize one.
I'm not interested in
Sub-
withholding payments. I'm
Well,
not interested in asking DHHS to withhold payments. I was just interested in making it a fine that they'd have to pay us for. You see, I was just trying to make it more of a deterrent. Because I just don't think you could be a deterrent enough in this regard, but if we don't have the authority to do it, that's a whole nother matter, and I'll move on.
I don't want to say we don't have the authority. We're just saying that the ability to enforce a fine, which we previously did by withholding a portion of a payment that would have come from DDSN to a provider, has changed under the new system. I do want to emphasize just the reality of the decrease in capacity, as Ann highlighted. That would absolutely have a financial consequence. And I think that it is shared across the staff, the belief that the risk of having a suspended license would be a behavior motivator as much as a fine would be.
Okay, all right. We just could have had both, but okay, that's fine. I'm not gonna push it any further. So then I'm looking at this thing, make sure I don't have anything else. I don't think I do. Okay, then we're gonna move on. Unless somebody has an objection, we're just gonna move on. Then we don't have any corrections to this one. Then we'll leave it like they've corrected it, which again, I want to say is a very, very good compared to what it's been in the past. As far as I know, we never had provisional licenses. We never had any of that stuff that we needed that's in here. So I would applaud those that did that, and other things too. And if there's anything else in the future that we feel like we should add, like fines, then maybe we can revisit it at a later date, because we'll go from there. And I do understand fully what you mean by decreasing the amount of people would also be a fine in a sense, but and we certainly should be able to do that. And I wouldn't, and that is a great thing about this policy. That's another great thing about this policy, which wasn't in any previous policies for reasons I'll never understand, but that I know of, and I'm sure it wasn't. But anyway, okay, so in 3 seconds, I'm going to move on to the next one if nobody has anything else to bring up. Okay, the last item that we're going to, the report we're going to, is 10403 DD. Has to do with quality assurance reviews for the non-ICFs and programs. And I just had the same I just wanted to ask one thing about that, which was on page on the first page, it says that we will, in order to determine compliance with DDSN standards and policies, reviews of this DDSN qualified providers are completed within approximately 12 to 18 months. I just wonder if we could, I would hope we would do our best to make it 12 months instead of 18, because we need to make sure they're in compliance, and we're going to become more of a compliance agency. So I would hope we could just put 12 in there, but if we have to leave it to 12 to 18, then we have to, if we don't have the people or whatever to do it. And the only other thing is I was going to say was on, well, it relates to the same thing we talked about before. It's just, it was just putting fines in this one too, trying to act as a deterrent. But if there's another reason why that's not wanting to be done, then I'll move on from this too.
Barry, can we have one of the staff just give us a review of what all this is about? I'm a
Go ahead.
little confused by the plan of correction and the review process through a QIO and all that. Could you just give
Go
me
ahead.
a quick overview of this?
Sure, Commissioner Thomas. This is Ann Dalton. I'll be happy to give you an overview. DDSN's contract compliance review process uses Alliant, which is a CMS recognized quality improvement organization. They do conduct reviews currently on a 12 to 18-month cycle. I've been doing some research as to what other states are doing, and it really varies from state to state. Some states have annual reviews. Other states stretch it out as much as 3 years, but typically those states also require an accreditation process in conjunction with their contract compliance. So it really varies from state to state in terms of the frequency of the reviews. As far as the type, they're looking for very basic compliance-oriented activities. The QIO looks to make sure that there are plans in place, that they are amended as they need to be. They're looking to verify authorizations. They're looking to make sure that staff are monitoring the services that they are supposed to be delivering. It is a task-based type of review. It is not quality improvement. So I want to stress that, you know, as we are moving forward, we're looking at transitioning to a quality improvement system, but this is strictly contract compliance right now. We have thresholds in place that we have identified in this directive. We have revised the directive, and this actually reflects our current practice, which is consistent with what CMS has told us we need to do. We have a threshold of 85%. It used to be 75%. The feds, Medicaid wants us to use a threshold of 85%, where we have to have quality improvement plans for providers that fall below that threshold. Whenever the QIO cites an indicator, when they find non-compliance, we do require the providers to complete a plan of correction. So they have to tell us what they are going to do to correct the error that was found in Johnny's file. And they also have to tell us what they are going to do systemically to make sure that same error does not occur in other files. The QIO will then go out to the provider, or they will contact the provider for a desk review approximately 6 months later, and they will conduct a separate review to make sure that those same errors do not continue. They want to make sure that they have successfully implemented that plan of correction.
Okay, Alliant is the QIO, right?
Correct.
Okay. So we get a copy of their reports, and who reviews Alliant to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing?
That would be the Quality Management Division at DDSN. So we review the findings from Alliant. We pull reports to look for rates of compliance with different indicators, and then we share that information internally for technical assistance purposes. When providers struggle to meet that 85%, they are contacted for technical assistance.
Okay. And does Alliant go out and help them, or are we supposed to go out and help them?
DDSN staff provide the technical assistance. That does not fall within Alliant scope.
Okay.
Alliant measures the compliance, but they do not provide the technical assistance. That is a DDSN role.
Is this a system that is used nationwide to contract with a QIO such as Alliant, and the standard would be an 85% standard nationwide?
The 85% standard is pretty consistent nationwide. Not all states use a QIO. There are some states that have their own state staff that go out to conduct the reviews. Many states use a QIO, and there are many states that simply require accreditation in lieu of a contract compliance process.
Well,
They
if we
would
did it,
require
we'd have to have,
accreditation.
if we did it, we'd have to have staff to do it. I mean, you'd have to hire people to do what Alliant is providing the staff for. So you all like this? I mean, this is something that I'm presuming our DDSN staff approves of Alliant and how we're doing this?
I believe so. We do have the opportunity on an annual basis to make tweaks to the key indicators. We can adjust them for measures for compliance. If there are particular areas that we want to focus more heavily, we have the ability to do that. The QIO contract is on a 5-year cycle, and we are entering our final year. So we will have the opportunity to make changes through an RFP going forward.
We've received no criticism from the feds on the performance, correct? There's nothing that has come down the pike that is either from the state or the feds that's critical of the way we're doing this and working with Alliant, correct?
There's not been criticism based on the way that we are working with Alliant. There are some performance issues that we are working with the Department of Health and Human Services to address.
When does the contract come up? When does the contract come up?
The contract runs through November, and we may be looking at an extension as we are transitioning to fee for service and looking at our oversight role. We may have an extension through the next fiscal year.
Yeah, I think one of the things to think about, and this is kind of kind of a high level concept versus in the weeds. So whenever we wrote the RFP for the contract compliance review, the QIO, DDSN was the provider of record for the services that our providers were rendering in the community. And Alliant was doing a review of those providers who were acting on our behalf, right? They were our contractors. We were, from a Medicaid perspective, the provider delivering the services. As we shift to fee for service, that whole outlook changes because those providers are all enrolled directly with Medicaid, and we become the oversight agency to measure kind of their contract with Medicaid to do the services. So it's a little different, which it's good that the RFP is coming up because I think we need to rethink a little bit about how we do it. But from the perspective of, the basic process of these are the basic requirements, somebody's got to review them. If you don't meet this threshold, you have to have technical assistance. You have to have a plan of correction. You have to draft a plan, a different corrective action plan if it's a lower percentage of compliance. I think that will all kind of still be there. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm reading on page 45 what technical assistance is involved. From year to year, how much effort from our staff at DDSN has gone into making sure that there is compliance, at least to reach the 75% level? I mean, do we have 5 people assigned to that, or 1 person, or 20 people?
We have subject matter experts for each particular program type. So if it is day services, we have someone who specializes in that area. If it's employment, someone else tends to work with providers in that area. Someone else handles residential or case management. So we have someone who is intimately familiar with all of the standards to be able to answer the questions for providers, provide them concrete examples of how they may demonstrate improvement in given areas, and provide information on what how a provider might be handling it in a different county.
How many different facilities does Alliant look at in South Carolina?
They go to all of the non-ICF locations. So for licensing, they're going to every single residential and day service facility.
Well, that's a lot of them.
Yes.
That's a lot of facilities. How many are we talking about? I could guess, but I'd probably be way off.
When you
You have a
count
clue?
the apartments that we have for SLP, the supervised living program, I would guess that's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2,000 individual locations. Plus you have
What?
follow-up visits
I
where
was-
necessary.
Yeah, you got your little community centers with 6 or 8 people in it and all that. I didn't realize the number was that high. You mean Alliant actually goes to all these places and checks them out?
Yes, they conduct an on-site inspection for every location every year.
Well, that's heavy lifting.
Yes, it is. There's also a
they-
residential observation process where they go and conduct interviews with people who are receiving services. That's in addition to the licensing visits and the contract compliance reviews. So they are definitely out and about in the community.
Okay. And my previous oversight or not oversight, my previous question about whether or not Alliant was banged up, doing a great job. I don't need an answer on that, but I think, Barry, I think this is something we need to kind of ask some questions about and making sure that there. It seems like a couple of years ago, it might have been almost pre-COVID, something came up in my mind that Alliant, no negative on Alliant, but it's something that we should really pay attention to. So anyway, I just throw that out, and since this has come up under the policy section, I would hope that the commission, DDSN commission, would just be kept fully apprised of how well they're doing. If there's any criticism, we need to know about it, particularly as we're going into a new contract period this coming November.
I think there's been a fair amount of criticism regarding the review structure. A lot of providers really do not like the remote review process where they are required to upload documentation to a portal. They would prefer to have on-site reviews, and there are costs associated with both ways of doing business. If they go on site, it's more manpower up front.
Well, I thought that's what you just told me a few minutes ago, that they're out there in the community and review all those 2,000. And are you telling me that's not what they do? They don't go see all 2,000 every year or whatever?
No, sir, let me be clear about the review process. They do go on site annually for licensing. They conduct on-site inspections at every facility. For contract compliance, which is a separate review process, that is a paper compliance process. So whether I look at your documentation electronically on TheraP or what's uploaded in a portal, or I drive to your location and look at it sitting at your conference room table, the information would be the same. It's paper compliance, looking at the individual plans and associated documents.
Well, we got 2 levels then. You got your licensing and you've got your paper compliance, which would be staff people, which would be safety issues and stuff like that, right?
Right.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Barry. Barry?
We're trying to get him back on.
Uh-oh.
How are we coming back there? He's gonna go try to call him again.
buying lunch. Everybody
If
speak
you
at the
haven't
same
had
time.
lunch yet, you're in a world of hurt.
That's why my stomach's growling. I haven't had lunch.
Oh, that's not good.
I know, that's what's making me grouchy.
Go.
Wait, I
Okay.
think, for a second and see if we get him. Let's use share.
Lost signal.
Oh, no, he was having to.
So maybe we can bring him on the phone.
Right. So I think. You walk out.
We don't need to say it, we just need to hear his voice.
Looks like I'm coming on.
You're on, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
Okay,
Welcome back.
thank you, sir. Sorry about that. I'm really sorry that I could not be there today as normal. As I normally am not able to be there, and I'm sorry for the technical difficulty. The only other thing I was just gonna ask the same question about this policy, and this one more important, I mean, more logical, I think, even than the last one, about, rather we would want to consider any other punitive type thing for somebody not reaching their 85%. Because, I mean, if they don't reach their 85%, then we have to do all this stuff. And I'm just trying to figure out if there's a way that we can make it more difficult on them for not reaching their 85% than just saying, okay, we're gonna, you're gonna have to go through all these, I mean, we're gonna have to go through these hoops. But I mean, there's really not, there again, there's really not a punitive thing for not reaching 85%. I just, and basically, as far as the federal government is concerned, if you don't reach 85%, you basically fail. So, at least temporarily. So we don't think there's any reason to do anything punitive for that.
That subject never came up. I got them to go through about a 20-minute rendition of exactly how the system works and if Alliant was really doing a bang-up job and were there any problems, and the bifurcated system of licensing versus the submission of documentation through a portal. 2,000 entities out there that they're kind of responsible for. The distinction between Alliance monitoring versus DDSN's responsibility for correction, that sort of thing, just to give me an additional overview, because it's been so long since I looked at it. And then the contract, Barry, is coming up with Alliant this November. There may be a request for an extension. That's the sort of thing we looked at. We really didn't get into the punitive aspect like we did with the other thing.
Yeah, I will say, I've mentioned this a little briefly in a couple of the commission meetings. There will be a new component to oversight that will start as soon as we get it all worked out with HHS, which will be post-payment review of the providers. And post-payment review is really where we would look at a Medicaid claim for a specific service done at a specific date. for a specific amount of time. And the whole concept of post-payment review is, did you have everything you needed in order to be able to bill for this service? And if the answer is no, the claim has to be paid back. So I think some of that sanctioning, not called sanctioning, right? It's post-payment review that says, you know, the service wasn't delivered, will happen naturally during that process.
So folks like that or entities like that, that may have a track record. What's the procedure for?
So what will happen in post-payment review is Medicaid will contract with DDSN as part of the administrative contract to do post-payment review. If I come in and find, and you know, we'll pull a sample of claims. If I come in and find on a given day that you had 15 claims and you don't have documentation for any of them, Medicaid will withhold payment for that amount of money. And obviously, there's this process going alongside it where we've provided technical assistance. The hope is that people are being trained up along the way and we won't run into a provider who all of their claims, you know, are not appropriate at post-payment review.
Well, I mean, that's a little bit different than what I'm saying, but I agree with you on that, and I think that's one of the great things about fee-for-service. But it's still a little bit different than what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, because you have not complied, you deserve some sort of punitive effect from that. And that it would seem to me, because again, we're dealing with people we serve, not paper, not, you know, abstract things. We're dealing with people here. And so I just wonder if there's anything we could do to make it more punitive so that they would be less likely to not reach an 85. But I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying at all, Lori. I mean, I think that's right. I mean, I think that's one of the great things about fee-for-service is they don't get paid unless they do it right. And
Barry,
that's one of the things I've been preaching for years.
Barry, if I could. Barry, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Barry. No, I didn't want to interrupt you. Look, I mean, we had a fairly lengthy discussion on the other thing. I think this is, you know, I like the idea of something that we could do punitively, but that's kind of a big subject. Maybe we can get staff to think about this and look at how others are doing it to prompt cooperation if there's something that's intransigent. You know, it might be something where if there has been egregious action on the part of a provider, that this would come and a decision would be made on the executive level, and we could set some parameters. But gee, it's nearly 20 after 4 at this point in time, and I really don't. I've got to be somewhere in about 15 minutes, so I don't want to get into the weeds on amounts and how much to hit them with and all that. Can we just let staff look at this and report back next time on the possibilities of punitive fines? And
I'm in agreement with that recommendation.
Oh, I agree with that. That's what I was going to say. But let me say that we should do this first. We should approve this as it is, and then revisit this in a few months if we decide if they decide it's possible to do some kind of punitive damage. Because this policy is so much better than the one before. We need to do this.
It could be. As far as I'm concerned, it could be next month, but I just wanted to make sure that we didn't get into a 30-minute discussion on amounts and get too specific when I would love to hear staff's recommendation on whether or not that would be helpful or harmful or whatever else. So anyway, that's my recommendation. I mean, we're almost finished with the agenda and it's we've been at it for over an hour at this point in time, so.
Okay, well, can we just approve the policy as it is and then move and then if we decide to revisit it, we will?
Yeah. Well, do your motion. Go ahead and do your motion.
Okay, we're gonna approve this policy as it is, and then we'll ask that they would revisit the possibility of fines in the near future. And if we hear from that, we'll revisit once we hear from that, we'll revisit this policy at that time if we do revisit it at all. But as of now, we will approve it as it is because it's again, it's a much better policy than we had in the
Good,
past.
without
So,
good,
if there's-
without objection, good.
okay. All right, well then, if that's the case, then we'll move on to the last section of our policy, which is, the last section of our agenda, which is the status update from Lori about the other policies.
Right, so as you'll recall, we had three policies, 125, 603, 02, 603, 05, that were out for external review. That external review period expired on April 21st. We didn't receive any comments regarding the directive, so they will be ready for presentation to the commission for approval at the next commission meeting on May 19th.
Thank you. And the last thing I'll say is that before we adjourn, is to say that the next meeting technically right now is June 14th, and I don't know by the end of the month whether I have a conflict with that or not. But if I don't, that's what we'll plan on right now. It's possible I could, but I don't think so. I'm not sure yet, so I'll just leave it at that. But it should be June 14th, but we'll just have to, but keep an eye out on for your emails and whatever for those that watch, and we'll see from there. And other than that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second that because I have to have a motion to adjourn in a second, so I'll second it. So we're adjourned. Thank you very much. Sorry for the delay in the glitch in the computer situation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.